Friends, we are standing at the edge of an hour unlike any other. An hour when the ancient words of the prophets are no longer distant echoes, but living realities unfolding before our very eyes. The world is shaking, the nations are trembling, and the signs that were once shadows on the horizon are now blazing across the heavens. In these days of confusion and chaos, the Lord does not speak without purpose. And I stand before you tonight with a word, not from my imagination, not from my own desire, but from a dream that God Himself placed upon my spirit. A dream so vivid, so urgent that it shook me to my core. A dream in which the veil was pulled back, and I witnessed what I can only describe as the rapture. The moment the saints are caught up, the moment the trumpet sounds, the moment the final sign is revealed. This is not a message of fear, it is a message of awakening. For when God shows us what is coming, it is because He is calling us to return, to prepare, to stand ready. We are closer than we have ever been, and the time is now. I stand before you carrying a weight in my spirit, a weight that is pressed upon me from the moment I opened my eyes after the dream. Not a burden of fear, but a burden of urgency, of awakening, of a divine stirring that refuses to be dismissed or forgotten. What I am about to share with you is not a product of imagination, nor is it born from emotional impulse. It came to me in the stillness of night, when the world was quiet and the noise of human thought had settled. In that sacred silence, something broke through, something revealed, something that pulled back the veil between what is seen and what is soon to unfold. A dream that carried the imprint of the eternal. A dream of the rapture, a dream that came with an urgency so profound that even as I speak these words, my heart trembles with the memory of it. The dream began in a world that looked familiar, yet something was different. There was a heaviness in the air, a tension that could not be seen but could be felt. People moved about their routines, unaware, unconcerned, absorbed in the rhythm of daily life. Yet underneath that normalcy was a vibration, as if creation itself was holding its breath. I found myself standing in a place that felt both ordinary and sacred, a place that resembled the world we know, yet seemed to exist on the edge of something extraordinary. And then suddenly, everything began to shift. The sky darkened, not with the coming of a storm, but with a silence that seemed to stretch across the heavens. It was as if time paused. In that pause, something in me knew that what was coming was beyond anything the human mind could grasp. Then, in an instant, the darkness was pierced by a brilliance that descended from above. Not the light of the sun nor the glow of fire, but a light that carried authority, purity, and a presence that shook the atmosphere. It was not a light that illuminated only the eyes, it illuminated the soul. Every shadow, every doubt, every fear seemed to melt under its radiance. The light spread across the sky like a wave of holiness, and within it, I sensed the sound, not heard by the ears but by the Spirit, the sound of a trumpet. It was not a sound of music, but a sound of summoning, a sound that called forth, a sound that carried the weight of eternity. It reverberated through the heavens and earth with a force that made everything within me stand still. At that moment, the world beneath that great light responded. I saw people lifted, drawn upward as if gravity itself surrendered to a higher command. They rose not in panic, not in confusion, but in a divine motion, as though they were being carried by the very breath of God. There was no resistance in them, only surrender, only recognition, as if the deepest part of their spirits had been waiting for this moment since the foundation of time. Their faces were not twisted in fear. They were marked with awe, with peace, with the realization that the promise spoken for generations had arrived. I watched as multitudes were lifted into that radiant presence, disappearing into its brilliance, their earthly existence transformed in the blink of an eye. But the dream did not end with their rising. I saw those who remained. Their faces were filled with shock, confusion, and terror as they looked to the sky and realized what had taken place. They ran, they shouted, they searched the horizon as if trying to grasp the moment that had slipped from them. They were not prepared. They had not listened. They had not believed. The final sign had come and they were still bound to the earth. Their cries echoed with a grief deeper than sorrow, a grief born from the sudden revelation that the warnings they had dismissed were true. Their hearts trembled under the weight of realization, and though no words were spoken to them, the truth was undeniable. The moment of gathering had come, and they were not among the gathered. As I stood within the dream, watching this unfold, something else filled the air, a whisper not spoken in sound, but alive in the spirit. A whisper that carried both love and warning, mercy and urgency. A whisper that seemed to say that the time is shorter than we think, that the signs are not distant possibilities, but present realities, that the world is racing toward a culmination that cannot be delayed or avoided. The whisper carried a message that pierced the soul. Prepare, prepare, because what is coming will not wait for human schedules. Prepare because the trumpet will not sound according to earthly convenience. Prepare because the moment will arrive in an instant, in the twinkling of an eye, and those who are not ready will not have time to become ready when it happens. The dream shifted, and I found myself looking at scenes of the world as it is now. Crowds moving in distraction, people chasing after noise, after pleasure, the temporary things of earth, unaware of the signs unfolding around them. I saw the shaking of nations, the trembling of economies, the unrest among peoples, the unraveling of morals, the confusion that has swept across cultures. I saw the rise of deception, of voices that speak with confidence, yet carry no truth, leading many into shadows. I saw hearts growing cold, compassion growing thin, faith growing faint, all of it weaving together into a tapestry of warning, a tapestry that mirrored the ancient signs spoken long ago. Then the dream drew me into another moment. I was standing before an open door. Behind the door was a brilliance like the one that filled the sky. Around the door there was movement, people stepping forward, entering with joy and expectation. But the door was not wide, it was narrow. Those who entered did so with intention, with focus, with hearts turned towards something greater than themselves. Outside the door stood many others. Some watched with longing, others with indifference, others with skepticism. But the door remained open, inviting, calling, waiting for those willing to step through. And as I looked at it, something within me understood that this door represented a window of mercy that still remains for now, a door that will not stay open forever. The dream continued, and I was carried to a place where the world was engulfed in a strange mixture of chaos and routine. People continued their lives as though nothing had changed, yet everything had changed. The air was heavier, the skies dimmer, and the sense of instability subtle yet unmistakable. It was as though creation itself was groaning, waiting, longing, straining toward the moment of final transformation. In that tension, I heard again the whisper, the urging, the reminder that the signs are not given for fascination, but for preparation. Not to fill the mind with curiosity, but to awaken the heart with urgency. As I watched these scenes unfold, I felt the weight of a truth that sank deep into my spirit. God reveals not to satisfy curiosity, but to stir repentance, not to entertain the mind, but to awaken the soul. The dream was not given to predict a date or create speculation. It was given to remind, to warn, to call. It was given because the heart of God longs for none to perish. It was given because the patience of God, though great, is not without a limit. It was given because the final sign is not meant to surprise the faithful, but to sober those who sleep. The dream carried me through moments of reflection, moments in which I saw people standing at crossroads. Some chose the path of light, others the path of shadows. Some walked toward truth, others toward deception. Some awakened, others hardened. And in every choice I felt the eternal weight of what was at stake. Not temporary consequences, not earthly outcomes, but destiny, eternity, the very soul of humanity. I understood that the urgency of the dream was not rooted in fear, but in love, in the desire of the Creator to bring His children home, to gather them before the final shaking, before the world steps into the unknown that lies beyond the trumpet's call. As the dream progressed, I saw a great shaking come upon the earth. Not a single event, but a series of tremors, spiritual, cultural, economic, natural, each one serving as a signpost, each one echoing the ancient words that have been spoken through generations. These tremors were not random, they were aligned, purposeful, signaling that the world is approaching a divine appointment. People reacted in different ways. Some awakened and sought the things of God with renewed passion. Others plunged deeper into distraction, hoping to drown out the unease rising within their spirits. Others chose denial, convincing themselves that nothing was happening, that everything would return to what it once was. But the shaking did not stop. I saw a great divide forming, not a divide of politics or culture, but a divide of hearts. A divide between those who discern the times and those who mock them, between those who prepare and those who procrastinate, between those who surrender and those who resist. The divide grew wider as the shaking increased, and in that divide I sensed the approaching moment when the trumpet would sound again, not in a dream, but in reality. The dream drew toward its final scenes, and I found myself standing once more beneath the brilliance that had filled the sky. Only this time I stood alone, watching as the last of those who were prepared were gathered upward into the light, and then suddenly the light withdrew. The sky darkened again, but this time with a weight far heavier than before. The world below stood in silence, a silence filled with dread, sorrow, disbelief. And I knew that the moment had come and gone. I could feel the ache of heaven for those who had not answered the call, who had ignored the signs, who had dismissed the warnings. I felt the grief of missed opportunity, the sorrow of hearts unprepared, and in that sorrow the dream began to fade. When I awoke, I found my heart racing, my soul trembling, not with fear, but with clarity. The dream was not just a dream. It was a message, a call, an awakening, a reminder that the rapture is not a distant myth, but a divine appointment, that the final sign is not hidden, but emerging, that the urgency is real, pressing, undeniable. The dream burns within me still, a flame that refuses to be extinguished, a reminder that the moment is nearer than we think, that the signs are unfolding even now, that the voice calling us to prepare is speaking not tomorrow, but today. There comes a moment in the story of every generation when the routine rhythms of life are interrupted, when the familiar patterns are shaken, when something deeper than the noise of the world begins to stir. A moment when the ordinary is pierced by the extraordinary, when the voice that has spoken from the beginning whispers again, calling humanity to awaken from its slumber. This generation stands in such a moment when the signs are all around us, yet so many walk with eyes closed, ears dulled, hearts distracted, a moment when the urgency of heaven is rising like a tide, yet multitudes continue as though nothing has changed. A wake-up call is sounding, not from human voices, but from the very heartbeat of eternity. Everywhere we look, the world is shifting. Moral foundations that stood firm for centuries have been shaken. Values once honored are questioned. Truths once clear are now blurred beneath layers of reinterpretation and confusion. What was once called good is now mocked, and what was once called evil is defended. The lines between darkness and light have been smudged by a culture that celebrates ambiguity over conviction. And in the midst of this shifting landscape, a deep spiritual sleep has settled over many. Not a sleep of rest, but a sleep of numbness, a sleep in which the soul becomes dull to the things that matter most, and a sleep in which the eternal is sacrificed for the temporary and the holy is forgotten amid the constant pursuit of comfort and distraction. Yet even in this cloud of spiritual drowsiness, something is stirring. Something ancient, something divine, something that refuses to let this generation drift silently into the night. It is the movement of God calling His people to awaken. It is the whisper of the Spirit stirring hearts that have grown cold. It is the shaking of circumstances, the trembling of the world, the sudden disruptions that break into human life and demand attention. These disruptions are not accidents. They are not coincidences. They are the wake-up calls of heaven speaking to those who still have ears to hear, urging them to rise from their slumber and recognize the hour in which they live. In every generation, there are moments that define the course of nations, moments in which destinies are shaped, But there are also moments in which eternity presses close, moments in which the unseen becomes clearer than the seen, moments in which the call to awaken becomes not merely an invitation, but a necessity. This generation is living in such a moment. The signs of the times are not subtle. They are written across the headlines, woven into the fabric of daily life, visible in the shaking of systems that once seemed unshakable. They appear in the anxieties of nations, the conflicts that rise without warning, the earthquakes of both nature and society. The world is rumbling, and creation itself is groaning, signaling that something is approaching. Yet so many sleep on. What does it mean to be spiritually asleep? It means to move through life unaware of divine purpose. It means to live as though time stretches endlessly before us. It means to treat the sacred as optional and the eternal as distant. It means to allow the noise of the world to drown out the whisper of God. It means to forget that life is not measured merely by days, achievements, or possessions, but by alignment with the one who formed us. Spiritual sleep is subtle. It creeps in quietly, settling over hearts like a soft fog. It does not feel like rebellion. It feels like comfort. It does not appear as defiance. It appears as routine. It does not announce itself loudly. It whispers, offering rest that is not rest, peace that is not peace, safety that is not safety. And before one knows it, the soul has drifted far from the fire of passion, far from the clarity of truth, far from the urgency of the moment. This wake-up call is a voice of mercy. It is not the harsh cry of judgment, but the loving voice of a father who refuses to let his children perish in their sleep. It is the call that summons us to rise, to shake off the weight of distraction, to open our eyes to reality. It is the voice that reminds us of what matters, that pulls us back to purpose, that pierces through the fog of apathy. It calls us to return to the fire that once burned brightly but may have grown dim. It calls us to examine our hearts, our priorities, our lives. It calls us to stand once again in the place of watchfulness, alertness, readiness. Look at the world and see the signs. See the escalation of turmoil among the nations. See the growing divisions between people. See the spiritual confusion that spreads like a shadow across the earth. See the unrest that shakes societies from their foundations. All of these are not random. They are indicators that something deeper is at work, that an ancient prophecy is unfolding in real time. They are signals that the hour is late, that the night is advancing, and that the time to awaken is now. The signs are like alarms ringing through the night, alarms that many ignore because they have grown accustomed to the noise. But these alarms are sounding louder and louder, each one a reminder that the moment of awakening cannot be postponed indefinitely. One of the greatest dangers of any generation is the assumption that there is always more time. This assumption lulls people into complacency. It leads them to believe that the decisions they should make today can be delayed until tomorrow. It whispers that preparation can wait, that seeking God can be postponed, that the urgency of the moment is exaggerated. But the truth is that time is not promised. Moments are not guaranteed, and the divine appointments of God will not wait for human readiness. The slumber of complacency is the enemy of preparation, and the call to awaken is a call to break free from that slumber before it is too late. A sleeping generation does not recognize the signs around it. It sees events but misses their meaning. It witnesses turmoil but fails to discern its significance. It experiences shaking but seeks only to return to normal, rather than understanding that normal is no longer an option. It reaches for comfort instead of clarity. It desires routine instead of revelation. But those who awaken, those who rise from their spiritual sleep, begin to see with new eyes. They begin to discern the patterns woven by the unseen hand of God. They begin to understand that the world is not falling apart. It is falling into place. They begin to grasp that the disruptions are not obstacles but invitations to prepare. To awaken is to realign. It is to step out of the fog and into clarity. It is to recognize what matters most and to pursue it with unwavering focus. It is to strip away distractions and return to devotion. It is to lift the eyes from the temporary and fix them upon the eternal. It is to become watchful, alert, aware of the spiritual landscape. It is to prepare the heart, not with fear, but with readiness. It is to live each day not as though life stretches endlessly, but as though we stand on the threshold of a moment that could come at any time. There is a stirring happening now across the earth. Individuals who once drifted in spiritual indifference are feeling an unexplainable pull back to God. People who once sought fulfillment in allow pursuits are discovering a hunger for something more. Hearts are being softened. Eyes are being opened. The Spirit is awakening those who have ears to hear. This is part of the wake-up call. It is not only global turmoil, it is personal awakening. It is the gentle tug at the heart, the moment of conviction, the renewed desire to seek truth. It is the sudden awareness that life has a purpose beyond what this world offers. Yet even as this awakening begins, there are forces that resist it, voices that mock the idea of spiritual urgency, distractions that pull people back into sleep, temptations that lure the heart away from what is sacred. These forces work tirelessly to keep this generation numb, unfocused, spiritually dull. They wrap themselves in entertainment, pleasure, ideology, and noise. They whisper the same lie that there is nothing to worry about, that everything will continue as it always has, that urgency is unnecessary. But these are the voices of sleep, voices that seek to pacify rather than prepare. They are the voices that keep the soul from hearing the call of God. The wake-up call of heaven confronts these voices. It cuts through the noise. It challenges the illusions. It demands that we see the truth. It invites us to rise above the distractions that seek to pull us back into slumber. It invites us to stand in the light, even when the world prefers the shadows. It invites us to choose awareness over apathy, conviction over compromise, devotion over distraction. This call is not only for the unbelieving world, it is for the people of God. For too long, many who once carried passion have settled for lukewarm living. Many who once prayed with fire now pray with formality. Many who once longed for the presence of God now glance at Him occasionally between moments of busyness. The wake-up call is for them too. It is for the ones who once burned bright but now flicker. It is for the ones who once lived with purpose but now drift. It is for the ones who once stood watchful but now sleep. It is a call to return, to rise, to rekindle the flame. A generation that is awake becomes a generation that discerns. It does not fall easily into deception. It does not wander blindly into danger. It does not mistake noise for truth. It sees beyond appearances, beyond headlines, beyond emotions. It sees the spiritual reality behind the physical events. It recognizes when a moment is not just a moment, but a sign. It recognizes when God is speaking through circumstances, through shifting seasons, through the shaking of the world. It recognizes that time is moving toward an appointed hour. This generation must awaken because the cost of remaining asleep is too great. The signs are not slowing down. The shaking is not decreasing. The world is not drifting toward stability, but toward climax. To sleep in such a time is to risk missing what God is doing. It is to risk being unprepared when the moment arrives. It is to risk standing on the outside where others step into the fulfillment of divine promise. The wake-up call is not a message of fear. It is a message of love. It is a call from a God who desires that none be lost. It is a call from a Father who wants His children ready. It is a call that echoes through Scripture, through history, through the present hour. It is a call that carries urgency because the moment carries urgency. It is a call that invites, urges, pleads with humanity to see the truth before the truth arrives with finality. This call summons us to live differently, to live with eyes open, hearts awake, spirits alert, to live with purpose, to live with expectation, to live with readiness, to live as though the world is not wandering aimlessly but approaching a divine moment. To live as though every day matters in the unfolding of eternity. To live as though the trumpet could sound at any time. To live awake,